Now, this is the second lesson in the Renaissance scheme of learning. And what we need to look at in this one is look at how the ideas of disease were communicated in this time period. We need to look at three things. We need to look at the term of humanism, so we need to look at how that had an impact on communication of the cause of disease. We need to look at the printing press, and we need to look at the Royal Society. And then the next lesson after this, we'll look at key individuals such as Sydenham, Vesalius, and Harvey. So, first thing we need to understand is, what does humanism mean? So first of all, one of the key changes during the Renaissance period was the rise of humanism. And this was really different to the conservative beliefs that we had in the medieval period. Humanism means that there was a love of learning. People wanted to learn, people wanted to develop their ideas, and it was really important that they did that. A new interest in classical scholars, and that means writers, and the belief that something could make up their own something. Now, what we have here is that people could make up their own minds when it came to discovering the truth of the world around them. So, first of all, it's quite important you understand that people looked at the work of Galen and Hippocrates and they made up their own minds. They made up their minds whether they believed it or not. Now, humanism rejects the idea that God was responsible for everything that happened, but they did not have an alternative explanation. People turned to the ancient scholars such as Galen and Hippocrates with new translations of their works beginning to appear. So people began to re-look over their work and decide whether it was true or not. Okay. Now, during the 17th century, blank began to take place. So during this period, people began to experiment. Experimentation took place. The church had less something. Church had less power, authority, and people like blank or Vesalius began to prove that Galen's ideas could have been wrong. As we mentioned, 300 of his ideas were disproven by Vesalius. However, it must be understood now, this is important. The ideas on the cause of disease did not change. It was a case that doctors were trying to think more about these, basically learn. Okay? It was really difficult to get people to change their ideas. Eventually they did. By about 1684, universities were using the works of Harvey and Vesalius. Unfortunately, it took a lot of work for them to get their works out into the population, but not just that, but people to actually believe it. The first reason why communication of the cause of disease was so effective was through something called the printing press. Now, while we look at the information, again, this could be a good revision task. There's 5 questions here. Who created it, when and where? How did it help spread ideas? How did it take power from the church? What did it do? And how did it help spread? Ignore that one because that's on there twice. So you've got 4 questions there. While we're reading through the next piece of information, develop an idea of what the printing press did to cause change. This came up in an exam last year, asking why there was medical development in the Renaissance period. And if you wrote a paragraph on the printing press, you'd be absolutely sorted. You've got to understand on why it caused change. We're now at the period of this paper where you must explain how change was caused by the people and the new developments such as the printing press. I'm going to read this information and then you can pause the video and go back to the last slide and start filling in some of the key facts about the printing press. Another task you could do is actually write a paragraph on how the printing press caused change. So in around 1440, Johannes Gutenberg, a German goldsmith, created the world's first printing press. It didn't take long for the new invention to grow, and by 1500, there were hundreds of them in Europe. The new printing press enabled information to be spread accurately and quickly. Let's just have a little bit of a revision recap here. Remember, before the Renaissance period, the books were copied out by hand, hugely influenced by the church as monks did this job. So straight away, what does it do? It takes a significant amount of power away from the church. Text no longer had to be copied by hand, meaning there were fewer inconsistencies in the same version of a text. So text couldn't just be changed. It also meant that scientists could publish their work and share it much faster than when work had to be copied by hand. Faster publication, more understanding of the cause of disease on a much quicker scale. The printing press also took book copying out of the hands of the church, as I've mentioned above here. This meant that a much wider variety of subjects were written about. So it wasn't just what the church wanted you to hear, it was a wide range of topics. Whereas before this, most of the things were about religious topics. The church was no longer able to prevent ideas that disapproved of being published. For example, physicians could not publish works criticising Galen. So this printing press allowed for more publications to be put into the populace without the church saying, no, not doing that. Gutenberg's press was a hand-cranked press that rolled ink over the raised surface of movable metal type and pressed against a sheet of paper. Prior to the printing press, as we've said, all text had to be handwritten or done by typographic handprinting, which could produce about 40 to 50 pages a day. So before this, that's how many pages you get a day. With the earliest printing press, that goes up to 3,600 a day. And by the year 1500, printing presses had produced over 20 million volumes of text. So the amount of work that was able to be produced because of this printing press allowed a cause of change in the communication, of what people thought caused disease. The more work that gets put out there, the more people can agree with it, disagree with it, and begin to start testing it. The printing press opened the door for the mass production of books and led to widespread sharing of knowledge. That's the key thing there. People began to share knowledge on a much wider scale. For the first time, the average person, now this is important here, printing press made books cheaper, made reading more accessible. The printing press is considered one of the most important inventions in human history. So hopefully you've got enough there to say why the printing press caused change in how disease was communicated. Again, you could go back to the last slide and start filling in some facts, or if you want a revision activity, you can pause this slide now and you can write a paragraph on how the printing press caused change. Imagine that you are writing a 12 marker, so you're looking through 3 pieces of evidence and explain on how the printing press caused a significant amount of change. So if you wanted to do the revision activity, pause this slide now and go on to and spend about 5-10 minutes doing that. Now, the next reason why communication changed. This is a motto of a group that was created, and the motto is take nobody's word for it. What does that suggest? Very simple. You are not just told what to do, and you don't have to believe everything you are told. What this motto is, it's the motto of the Royal Society. The Royal Society, which we'll look at shortly, it began to transform how scientists communicated with one another. Really important. Take nobody's word for it. Basically means only trust your own work. If you don't agree with someone else's, then actually look into it further. Okay, what this is going to do is it's going to develop the cause of disease quite significantly. So very similar to the last part, my advice would be you could do one of two revision activities here. Number one, read through the information and complete the table. Or number two, write a paragraph on how the Royal Society caused change in developing medicine in this period. Now, I'll go through this table, but again, if you're going through the revision exercise, if you want to complete it, pause the video here after I've read through the information. So, the desire to explain the world in secular terms led to a big increase in the number of experiments being carried out. Scientists wanted to talk to each other, and this led to the founding of the Royal Society. Now, the way I describe this usually to my classes is it's just like a great big science club. They sit, they talk, they experiment, they look at other people's work, they experiment, but this group has real credibility. The Royal Society, they met for the first time in Gresham College in London in 1660. And what they wanted to do was to promote and carry out experiments to further the understanding of science. They also promoted the sharing of scientific knowledge and encouraged people to argue over new theories. 2 years after they first met, they received their Royal Charter, which gave power to the group from the monarch, the king, which gave this group more credibility, and they got this from Charles II. Now, the support of the king gave the Royal Society credibility. More people were going to trust it as the king granted a Royal Charter. If the king approves it, then it's quite obvious they were doing something right. It also meant that more people were going to send work to the Royal Society as they look more respectable. And also people were willing to donate money to support the scientific work of the Royal Society. Another key thing that the Royal Society did for change was they produced their journal called Philosophical Transactions. And its 350th anniversary was in 2015. It's a scientific journal that talks about people's ideas. Now, when it was first published in 1665, it had letters, book reviews, summaries of experiments, and observations that were carried out by European scientists. This was the platform that the Royal Society needed for people to share their work, agree with it, disagree with it, spread new ideas. The Royal Society published several letters from Leeuwenhoek, who we looked at earlier on, who describes animal kills. The Royal Society also offered translation of scientific texts, and it encouraged the members to write the reports in simple English instead of Latin, to make it accessible for all. Remember, we were living in a time of loving of learning, so people wanted to do this. It also requested that members provide a copy of any of their submissions, which were put into a reference library, so anyone could study them, but they couldn't take them out. If you go to a library today, reference means that you can't take it out because it's very important. The Royal Society made it possible for physicians and scientists to access and study each other's research, and it was important to the communication and development of new ideas. By people sharing ideas, they could improve the work or confirm what other people had done. The Royal Society is a really easy group to write a paragraph on. So once again, if you want to do a revision task, either complete the table here or write a paragraph with 3 pieces of evidence and explanation about how the Royal Society caused change in Renaissance medicine. Remember, the focus has to be on what the Royal Society actually changed. You can even use their motto, take nobody's word for it, or nullius in verba, which is what it was in Latin. If you are going to do the tables, then quickly pause this video so I can go through the answers. If you're doing the paragraph, then move on and listen to the next bit before writing it. So how did the Royal Society promote medical advancement? They carried out experiments. They promoted sharing of knowledge and encouraged argument. Published the Scientific Journal of Philosophical Transactions, but offered funding for translation. Encouraged members to write in simple English, not Latin. Put copies of articles into a reference library, and their motto, take nobody's word for it, nullius in verba. The impact of the Royal Society: it provides a platform for scientists to share their work, made it possible for physicians and scientists to access each other's study. It meant it could spread quickly, and new ideas could be developed if people agree or disagree with each other's works. Now, if you want to just have an overview of this lesson as a whole, which caused more change? The printing press or the Royal Society? Now, if you've done the 2 paragraphs, you'll be in a great position to decide. But this is a good way, especially if you've got a 16 marker, of building criteria. If you got a question that said how there was little progress from the years 1250 to 1700, in your in your disagree paragraph, to say that there was progress. To show a criteria, you would say which one was the most important and which one was slightly important. Don't just write this was this, this was that, this was this. If you want to get the top grades of an 8 or 9, ranking your knowledge is really key to developing the ideas further. So this would help you by looking at this little plenary task. What was the most important in regards to causing change? Printing press or the Royal Society?